Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Ed Opperman, private investigator, digital forensic investigator, blogger. I have a blog called the Opperman Report, and we got a really good show today for you. We got a really good show, like Ed Sullivan. We got Russ Dizdar, who is a radio host himself. He's the host of the Ragged Edge Radio, and you can find Russ's information on russdizdar.com and shatterthedarkness.net. And Russ is a fascinating guy. If you go to my blog, the Opperman Report, we have links up to his radio show and to his website. And one of the things that caught my attention was he describes himself as what is this here? Maybe as a rock and rollin' bar fighting partier. So there's a really good chance that me and Russ had a fight one time in a bar back in the 70s and the 80s. So let's bring him on. Russ, you there?
We're here today. Appreciate it, Ed. Thank you so much. Glad to be here with you.
Thank you, sir. Hey, tell the audience about yourself and what you're up to.
Sure, that little piece right there is about what I was in the 70s, and that's what I was. I was raised in just 60s, 70s, and just bar fighting, crazy, looking for things, trying to be, I tried to straighten my life out and become a Buddhist for a while, and, but the truth is, in 1975, I came to Christ, my life was changed, and then we, just went into ministry and began to work, and we've been doing that for over 38 years now, and, that involves the occult crime aspect, the satanic crimes, and so just, in a real sense, a husband and a father and just, love to be out in the woods jogging, those kind of things. Just a guy that's out there. But, we entered this field of, occult crimes, satanic crimes in the context of, helping young people back in the late 70s. And it has turned into an incredible underworld. And that's what we do up to this day.
Okay. Well, let's get a history here. You were a hard partying guy. You grew up with the 60s values and stuff like that. Pretty much like my own story. And then you got saved. Again, like my own story. I got saved as well in 1989. Now, why don't you tell us your salvation story, how it came about?
Sure. I mean, it was really kind of, here I am, somebody who's never been raised in church, didn't know, but a couple of verses that people told me about. I knew a little bit. I believe God was out there, but, in late 60s, early 70s, we got into the drug world. We got into fighting and, just doing what a lot of other students were doing. And when I graduated from high school, we were just major partiers. But I was searching. And so I got into, I was reading anything, occult level stuff, satanic stuff, trying to find powers, trying to find something, but my life was still out of control. So, in martial arts, I joined a segment of it. That was called Golden Buddha Meditation. And I went to a temple for a number of years, learning from a master how to leave the body, meet ascended masters, find powers, get enhancements, get powers to fight, and those kind of things. So in the midst of all of that, I'm still kind of doing some partying, but I didn't want the people at the Buddhist temple to know. We're trying to combine doing certain drugs with getting out of the body, astral projection, all this kind of stuff they were training us to do. And then one night at a big party, a man comes in that I knew. I knew him as somebody who, and we were not like street level, big time drug, users or in any way pushers. But just the party level of it was just every single weekend and 2, 3, 4 times a week. And so this big party we have in 1975, there's the house is packed. The music is just rocking the walls out. People are drinking and partying and of course smoking up in the house. Or in the apartment that I lived in. And everybody's just partying. We're used to that. The week prior to that, we were engaged in one of these attempts of getting out of the body, and it was a weird experience, Ed, because two of us that were doing this, we really came close to, I believe, losing our lives. We were involved in this out-of-the-body stuff. We thought we heard voices telling us to just leave the body permanently. You'll have to kill yourself. You can be out here and find all the wisdom of the ages. We can be free from these limited bodies. This was incredible because two of us together were experiencing it, and we kind of did a countdown from 10 to 1. We were really gonna maybe do this thing, take our lives and be free. But a weird experience in the middle of that. The friend that I was with, it's almost like all I can say back then was like some presence actually came through him, and I could see it come through his face. And it was so strange, I ran. In the context of that night that we were supposed to just leave this world. So, the next day we're back, doing stuff. The next few days partying.
For you. How old
Sure.
were you, and what year was that?
Sure, that was 1975. I was 19 years old. I was just turning 19 in August, and and that's all we did. We we got out of high school. I moved out pretty quickly so that we can party on our own. I lived with 3 other guys in an apartment, and it became just known for partying. Each of the guys had their own thing, but I was into what I called spirituality and spiritual things and supernatural things, and I was trying to, find something, but I didn't know. I mean, I believed God was out there, but I didn't know what this stuff was, and even those voices that night, and so we came very close. I'm 19 years old. I'm reading all these books, listening to this, master at a temple. We're there in a certain, kneeling position to practice what he's teaching us. So I'm trying to put it all together, and the very next week, my friend and I are talking about this whole thing, and we're both agreeing that it was real, but it was scary, and we really don't want to, take our own lives, but we want to do this again, maybe get a few other people to do this, to test this thing about leaving the body or talking to entities or whatever. Well, that night, we had a big party, everything was going on, we planned on doing stuff late after the party that night, but a guy comes into the house that we knew that was once one of the guys that sold drugs. He was a partier. We heard that he got saved. We didn't know exactly what that meant. We heard that he came to Jesus, and everybody was calling him a Jesus freak, back in the 70s, 75. And so we're hearing the story, but all of a sudden he showed up at the party. And Eddie walks in, and when he walked in, I was looking through the crowd of people. I could see him because somebody yelled, "Hey!" And his name was Steve. Steve's here. And I look, and I'm like, it's almost like a bright light walked through the door. It's like, I know that something was different immediately. And I looked at him and I saw him immediately talk to the person next to him. Hey, Jesus loves you. Jesus will change your life. You need to come to Christ. You're going to go to hell if you don't. And he just was really unleashing like that. And the next person. And I could see people beginning to give their joints away, they're setting their beers down. Somebody turned the music down. People were leaving the room. 3 individuals were running from the bathroom. I ran that direction to go in there with them to lock the door. I don't even know why we were afraid of him, but he was witnessing to everybody. And no one, they were either listening to him or kind of, literally running or getting away from him. And so they locked me out of the bathroom so I couldn't get in there. So I run out on the back porch, a deck behind the kitchen. And I could hear, though, because it's summer, it's still like fall for us here, September, and I could hear him in there witnessing and sharing. I'm kind of laughing, thinking, okay, get Fred, get John, I'm like, kind of laughing about it, but then I'm sitting there thinking, why am I afraid? What is wrong with me? I'm spiritual. Then all of a sudden, this screen door comes flying open, and this guy, Steve, that I knew, walks out. And you got to understand, for me, and I know you'll remember Cheech and Chong. That's kind of like in kind of a sanitized version. That's our little world. And when he walked out, I'm looking at him, and the only thing I knew religious wise was Moses and the Ten Commandments, Charleston Heston, and this reminded me of all. I said to myself, this is like Moses walking out the back deck. I couldn't look at him, and he had such a presence about him, and I just knew that it was contrary to what I was into, and I was like trying to not look at him in the eyes. I was looking down. I felt just like I'd been caught or something. And I look up at him and I said, "Oh, Steve, how you doing?" And immediately he begins to just tell me, "Russ, Jesus loves you. He'll change your life. You need to come to him. He'll give you the power of his spirit. His presence will come in. You're going to lose your soul if you don't." And he just poured out the gospel. And I was so undone by that. I said, "Listen, I got to leave." I got off the deck, went to my $35 1965 Impala that I bought, and took 2 wires. This is a true story. I took 2 wires to start the car. I start my car. I leave my apartment unlocked with all the partiers there. I drive 20 miles to my home, and I come in the side door, and I don't know who was up or whatever. I just said, "I'm staying here for the night." I went down to my bedroom, my old bedroom, where all the partying went on there. And, you know, I have pictures of cult stuff up on the walls and, you know, bands and Black Sabbath and Blue Oyster Cult and all these groups. And, so I go in there, I lay down, I'm thinking, man, I'm away from that guy. But that whole night, I mean, the moment I closed my eyes, all I could see was this guy talking to me and what he shared about Jesus. And I just never heard it this way in all of my life. Wasn't raised in church. And all of a sudden I'm seeing my life as lost and separate and really dumb. And I realized, you know, I could have lost my life the last week. This is all wrong. There's deception here. I thought more about Jesus. I thought about my life. This went on for 4 hours of just kind of agonizing, going back and forth. And finally, I just rolled out of bed in 1975, September, middle of the night, and I got on my knees. I didn't know how. I've never been to a real church service. I've been to a funeral or a wedding, and so I just got out of my bed and on the floor. I'm saying, God, I don't know everything about you, Jesus, and all I know is that I know you're real, and I know what He said is true, and I want you in my life, and I just started repenting and renouncing everything, and I just began to say, God, how stupid this was of me. Nobody told, I mean, I'm just going through all of this litany of just, I'm so sorry, Lord. Jesus, come into my life, save me. And I can only tell you this, I knew the living Christ came in and the power of God came into my life. I felt totally cleansed, I mean, it was just like I learned later being born again, born of the Spirit of God and what it meant. And you got to understand, when I did this night, the rest of the night, every time I closed my eyes, I'm like wanting to go tell all my friends that, hey, what Steve said is true. Jesus is real. The power of God is real. You got to know Him. And, so I'm all night closing my eyes thinking about how I'm going to tell everybody and how I'm going to, go to anybody and tell them that this Jesus is really real and He loves me now and I know Him now. And so the next day, that's what I started going to find my friends. At first, some of them were like, "You're crazy, Russ." Half of them got saved within the first week.
Yeah, right.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
Some of them laughed and made fun. Others got saved right away because all I did was the same thing. What I was told, who Jesus is, what He did, how He died, shed His blood, buried, rose, loves me, alive today. I told all my friends the same thing. And some laughed and ran and thought, "Oh man, you guys are weirded out on drugs." But immediately within the first couple of weeks, 6, 7 others came to Christ. And that's where it all started, just in knowing the difference. And I really believe that God saved me in a critical time. And I found out later, because I have not been to churches. And we used to have this Baptist preacher guy next to me that used to come over and try to witness, and we'd run from him and cuss at him. We did parties at our house, and I'm sorry to say, this is true. Ed, this is a true story. We used to go over and when we were drunk, stand on his car, pee on his car, do all kinds of stuff. Just crazy, teenage, rebel rousing. And most of the fights in the bars, you're drunk and you get beat up anyway, and you don't remember.
Russ, I got to interrupt you, man, because
Sure.
This is like hearing my own story.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. When I got saved in 1989, everyone who knew me got saved. All my friends got saved.
Wow.
My entire family, my family's saved to this day. They're pillars of the church. It's just because when people saw the change in me, the overwhelming change in me, they had said, "Well, I got to have this too. I got to see what it is." So I tell you, you're really mad, dude. You are so inspiring me today. I thank you, brother. Thank you.
Sure. Well, that was it.
I got questions.
Sure.
Okay. Now, first of all, when you were dabbling in all this stuff, like the out-of-body astral projection and stuff like that, because I was doing the same thing around the same time, like 79, 78. I was into that New Age stuff as well. But now, didn't you have a feeling, though, that what you were dabbling in was didn't you have a fear that you knew it was wrong?
I really did, and I think two things. One was that spiritually lost, dead to God, though I believed He was out there somewhere. I mean, I would even defend God when people would say God's not real, whatever. I said, no, man, God's really, I would be high or on acid. Well, no, God is really out there, and yet I tried. I think within that same month I was trying to read the book of Revelation. Someone gave me a Bible, and I was afraid to turn the Bible upside down to where the Holy Bible part was, upside down. I was like, oh, don't, I told my friends, don't do that. That's not, it was just, that was the only thing we knew. Kind of a fear of God, didn't know how to get there. So I think for me it was simply, I just, being dead spiritually, and then, with the 60s and 70s, this massive development of the New Age movement, the occultism, the Satanic Bible's written in 69, the Satanic Church by LaVey started, and there's this, there's just so much to get into. The music industry was getting there, I was such a Black Sabbath fan. Ozzy Osbourne's first album, The Wizard, when he talks about Lucifer, it was just all of this, culturally we were being drawn in, but I didn't know any better. And so it was real. But you're right. I really, none of that, even the so-called, the Buddhism. I mean, I realized Buddha was dead. He never showed up. And I was serious. I was a serious seeker. I was paying money to go to this temple and learn from this guy from China, this master, and practice these practices. But none of it led me, I would even say this, none of it led me even to the edge of God. I mean, I think it led me further away or blinded me even more. And it wasn't until that guy just came in, because, we both know now that the power of God is in the gospel. No one can believe without hearing it. Faith comes from hearing. So I think when it was just poured out onto me that night, it was like just heaven ripped open, and I could see this guy coming in. Yeah. And that's why I ran from him. He had light. He had the Spirit of God. He had Jesus was in him. And I didn't want to look at him in the eyes, and I wasn't there. So there's no question and even more at that moment, I realized I was squirming and I was really battling the fact that I really came, convinced 2 weeks prior, or almost 2 weeks prior to that, this night where we almost took our lives to, because we thought, well, we could be out there with the ascended masters. It was so stupid, so deadly. I knew it wasn't right, but I guess I was trying to search, and I 2 weeks after I got saved, I go to this church, and this girl shows up and says, "What are you doing here?" And I said, I got saved, I'm coming. She said, "No, you didn't." I said, "Yes, I did, I got saved." She said, "No, you didn't." I said, "Yes, I did," because these people knew me. They said, you're so bad, you couldn't have gotten saved. I said, "Listen, I got saved," and this girl's name's Julie. She says, "Come over here." I told her just, 2 weeks ago, and I got saved, and we're being taken to churches, and I ended up at this one church. She says, "Well, this is where Reverend Rogers was. Did you know that?" And I said, "Well, no. This is the guy that lived next door to you, that every Sunday morning for 2 years, he would say, 'Let's pray for the Dizdar boys.'" And I'm like, I'm sitting there, and she's like, got tears in her eyes. She says, "Russ, I don't really know you, but, this month, I found the Green High School yearbook. I opened it up, saw your picture. I remembered how the pastor asked us to pray for you, so I put my hand on your picture, and I began to pray for you here in September." And it was like, you know what? She may have been the one that prayed, that God intervened, that saved my life, physically, spiritually, and every other way. It was to me, there's no way I can forget it. No way I can not tell people the astounding way in which God did this. But I think it was in the answer to prayer. I think God moved her to pray, and I think it was critical. I knew it was wrong. I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't know.
Yeah, you were exploring.
I didn't know where to go.
But now, what about this guy Steve? Are you still in touch with him?
Yeah, as afterwards, we ended up going to the church. He took us to his church. And you got to remember again, if you think in terms of Cheech and Chong or just a rock and roller bar fighter, and someone trying to be and I think even the people at the Buddhist temple thing thought, here's this crazy American trying to, become one. So Steve took us to his church. We got in there and we're starting to learn how to sing these hymns, and I mean, it was a brand new experience for me. But I didn't care. I didn't care what people thought. I mean, we're not even blue jeans and t-shirt. We don't know anything different about the culture of the church or anything back in '75. So Steve was, Steve went on to grow and was taking some Bible courses in the first 6 months. So I went to a Bible school immediately in the first 6 months. And Steve eventually moved to Florida, and I haven't seen him for a long, long time. The friend of his that got saved the same week that I did, he's now a local pastor here in the Akron area, Tony. I know him. And all the guys that I know on my side that got saved the same, that same month, every one of them continued to grow, go to Bible school to this day, 38 years later almost. They're all still walking with the Lord, and they're out there witnessing, and so, but I haven't seen Steve for many years, but for that first year and a half, he was great. He was growing
and you never forget him. You're never going to forget him. Yeah?
Oh, never. Never.
Okay,
if I
now,
see him, yeah.
What happens next then? I know because you went on to become a chaplain, a police chaplain.
Yeah.
But take us along the road. What happens next?
Sure. Well, yeah, I think in 75, I kind of launched off to a local Bible school people told me about, and I didn't know any difference. So he took me there to this local Bible school, they have 3 courses on Monday. They had like 30 courses, but you can take up to 3 on Monday, 3 on Thursday. So I took all of them. I just wanted everything. I was reading my Bible. I had an old army jacket. I had Bibles and Christian books people were giving to me, and I'm reading everything. So I go off to that Bible school. I go there through the next part of the year. I go off to a local college down in Cumberland College. I went with other friends that were going into ministry. I went down there for a couple sessions in Cumberland, Kentucky. But then I come back here. I go back to the Bible school. I go back to Malone College. I get involved with Youth for Christ. I get involved with local ministry. They made me a youth pastor. So this is 76, 77, 78. I'm doing all this, going to school, doing ministry. And this is about the time, we're doing evangelism, but we're also running into deliverance case, folks like I was. And so whether we're doing street ministry or doing, Youth for Christ ministry in the schools, we're running into kids everywhere that we're finding out that are into Satanism or the occult. So by 78, 79, I formed a group within Youth for Christ called Shatter the Darkness. And I just had a small team. I said, let's target every kid in all the schools that we are now involved in, and let's target all the ones that are into Satanism, into this really, underground stuff, and let's go after them evangelistically. In that process, that first year, we began to, evangelize, meet. Then we got into, and we never knew how to do deliverance. We never seen a demonic presence manifest, and all of a sudden, that begins to happen. These kids tell us about parents that gave them the Satanic Bible or the ABCs of witchcraft. These books, we begin to be taken to ritual sites and places. And so I decided there in 79, I'm going to read every book. I'm going to go to every conference. I'm going to do everything I can. And right around there, we met a law enforcement agent that was doing seminars. He brought us into OPATA, the police academy, got us kind of under because we weren't officers, but they got us in under the table to go to the occult satanic crimes courses. And then we met probably in early 80, we met one of our first satanic ritually abused, where this whole multiple personality, really dark network underground, we didn't know a lot. So again, we just kept trying to learn everything, read everything, every seminar, begin to work with anybody. We were kind of dismayed that a lot of churches didn't do deliverance or help people in that way. So we decided, we had offices outside the church. Shadow the Darkness eventually became a separate ministry. When I left Youth for Christ, they didn't want that. So we just launched it in the 80s as a separate thing and kept working with people, opened the doors to our little offices to anybody that would come. And that was between going to every conference, learning everything, dealing with the real now underground satanic ritual abuse, other local cult crime cases.
Okay, let me ask you about that. Okay,
sure.
Satanic ritual abuse. Okay, now there was a big splash in the media about it back in the 80s, and then it was kind of discredited. Okay, and was kind of ridiculed and whitewashed and covered up. But now you were exposed to this firsthand. Yeah. So let's hear about how you were exposed to it firsthand and how you came to believe it was real and it existed.
Sure. One of the first cases, I think, was like early 80s. When I got back from the police academy one night, I got a phone call, and a mother, a stepmother actually, was pleading with me. She says, I heard about you. My stepdaughter is in the psych ward at the local hospital. She's telling me this whole story about the mother being this satanic priestess and this whole big story. So I go to the psych ward that night, meet this little 13-year-old who's repetitively writing this, I must offer myself in the flames to prove my love to my mother. She's drawing eyeballs and all these this language she's writing on these papers, and I don't even understand what it all is. I mean, I understood Anton LaVey Satanism, rock and roll Satanism, that kind of stuff, but this was more sophisticated. And so we leave, and she wanted me to find her some kind of cult ritual book because she needed to do powers against her mother. And I'm like, no, I don't, bottom line was I led her to Christ. We began to help her. She got out of the psych ward. We began to help her, and then we got this deliverance stuff. We realized not everything in her is demonic. Something else is here. We understood later as programming, mind control issues. She was very sophisticated with what she knew. We couldn't believe what a little 13-year-old knew. We really prayed through and broke this programming to where she didn't kill herself on her 14th birthday. That was kind of programmed in her, but I also believe demonically empowered because she didn't want to be in that stuff. But when we helped, then we got, all of a sudden we're getting phone calls with this weird language and death threats. And
okay, before you get into that, because we're coming up to a break.
Sure.
In less than a minute. So we got today's guest is Russ Dizdar. He has a show on Blog Talk Radio. He has a radio show called the Ragged Edge Radio. Where do you find Ragged Edge Radio? Is that Blog Talk?
No, that's a satellite, actually, worldwide, and then internet live streaming. So just, if they go to shatterthedarkness.net, they can see very clearly how to connect to that.
Gotcha. The website is shatterthedarkness.net.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Russ Dizdar. And we'll be back in about 3 minutes. Okay, we're back with the Opperman Report. This is your host, private investigator, digital forensic investigator, Ed Opperman, president of Opperman Investigations and emailrevealer.com. Time is going so fast today. We got an amazing guest, Russ Dizdar, who's just a fascinating guy. I'm loving this. His story is so much like mine. It's just unbelievable. You can listen to his radio show, which is called the Ragged Edge Radio, and you can find the link to that on his website, shatterthedarkness.net. Before we get back to Russ, I just want to remind everybody that this is a listener-sponsored station. We don't have any kind of corporate sponsorships, no advertising. So if you want to keep this kind of information coming out here, you got to visit the website, freedomslips.com, and click on the donate button and help to support the station. I also want to thank real quick my producer, Ann, who's out today. She's out. She had an emergency at work, and she couldn't help produce today, so she had an emergency. And but all her work and putting a show together every week is just unsurpassable. Just I can't live without her. Okay, but I'm doing my best. And also to Christoph Moses for all his help in getting up the work, the videos on the new YouTube channel that we have, the Opperman Report YouTube channel. Okay, Russ. Now, you were telling us about how you went to visit this little girl in the psych ward, and she actually wanted you to find her spells, satanic spells that she could use to battle her mother. But instead, you introduced her, you led her to the Lord, and she got saved. But I just want to clarify one thing. You said you had come from the police academy, so at that time you were already, you knew you had a calling. You knew you had a vocation to be in the ministry. But you also were involved in the police academy?
Yeah, I think it was because I desired to learn. I mean, I went to Moody Bible, I went to Cumberland College, Malone. I was just somebody who's wanted to always, from the time I got saved, just read, learn, go to, take everything. So in the satanic stuff, when we began to learn more, I really believe that was just an answer to prayer. God led us to meet this guy back in those days, Tom Wedge. He was a law enforcement agent. He wrote a book called The Satan Hunter. Eventually, and he just kind of, heard about us, and he invited us to go. So they took us into the police academy, went to the specialized cult training, satanic, and we were seeing, they were, I guess, in the 80s and especially the 90s, obviously, every police department began to get specialists in that would teach on satanic crimes, cult crimes, and we were seeing slides, we were seeing things that, nobody else was seeing. Even in the 80s, we were seeing, and they would say, and right in the police academy, even the one by Columbus, they would say things like, well, don't tell the public about the satanic side. It creates panic, and just deal with the crime. And so, through all of that, and through having Tom come in and other law enforcement agents come in and other, we finally got recruited by a law enforcement agent that was sent to us by their chief, from the University of Akron, to recruit us in to make us their police chaplain, so that they could use me in their police academy to teach on and to help teach on occult crimes, which they allowed me to do in the academy in their occult satanic crimes course at the university. So we decided we would just go everywhere, but we made that, like, whether it was going to police academies, working with law enforcement agents, calling on, we would still be in the context of evangelism, and we were developing our side of how to deal with this.
Let me ask you a question, because you keep saying we. Like, you had like a group of young guys on fire for the Lord that were working with you?
Yeah, absolutely. That's, because again, even though we've done hundreds of deliverances and this kind of occult crime stuff, we were to this very day, we're evangelistic in our approach, right. No matter who it is, whether it's lawyers or whoever we get involved with, victims' parents, we're all trained to then, hey, let's bring Jesus to everybody. He's the hope of the world. He brings healing. But we were willing to go anywhere, learn, and so we were going to university level. We were going to the psychologists and psychiatrists were beginning to hold conferences. There was a major mind control conference dealing with satanic ritual abuse in Richmond, Virginia, that is really historic in this whole agenda. It's when the False Memory Foundation eventually began to get started and fight against anybody making allegations.
Yeah. Are they still around today?
They are. They're still in Philadelphia. They're still operative, but now that they've been kind of outed that they had 2 CIA psychiatrists that helped start the organization, Jolly West and Dr. Orrin, that were mind control specialists, and they understood splitting and programming and all the rest. So everybody knows in the whole field that they're really a front. Yeah. And in the late 80s, we were dealing with so many cases, because what happened is we began to deal with cases, and we really were, praying through this and really having to learn quickly. We were getting people from everywhere, coming to us, and more of these newer underground cases, satanic ritual abuse cases. By 1992 and 93, we had read about Dr. Holly Hector from Centennial Hospital. They reported, because we were learning that many hospitals were having these folks show up, and they were developing special elements, groups of psychiatrists and psychologists that would help deal with these guys. Because they didn't know either. They didn't know, in the manuals, the diagnostic manuals, they didn't have anything at all to diagnose the cases. And then eventually they had to come up with the DSM-3, the DSM-4. They had to come up with multiple personality disorder, or DID, which really doesn't define what this is, because the roots of it go back to Germany. The roots of it are Nazi-oriented and mind-controlled, but coven-oriented.
Well, then let me ask you this, okay? Because sure. MK Ultra obviously was a government-sponsored program, and going all the way back to Nazi Germany. So now, when you were trying to fight against this, weren't you having? Was there any kind of police, like, trying to silence you or oppose you in your fight against this? I'm glad you asked that, because the truth is, because I worked among a lot of officers, we called on a lot of officers for help through the 80s and especially in the 90s, because we had a lot of death threats, people coming, a lot of stories about all of that. But we found out within law enforcement, here's the truth, even when I was a police chaplain, just, trying to be a witness to law enforcement, driving with them, riding with them, doing stuff, you've got very good officers. You've got very good officers that have family, want to do their job, and they can go home. You got officers that are okay, it's just their job. You got officers that are, not so great. And then here and there, you do have some really, some folks using their positions, and we did find that there were, people, law enforcement agents can be paid off and be brought in, and so we had to begin to become very careful because we had a federal officer's wife we began to work with, and the federal officer he was one of the top 10 agents in the United States. This is out of Cleveland. We learned the hard way with this woman though. With the multiplicity, with the satanic side being set up, following. And here's what we did. And back in the 80s, when all this was going on, when Shadow the Darkness was developing more and more with more volunteers and more helpers. But within that even, we had a specialized group of 3 or 4 that we called the SIIU, or the Shatter Intervention Investigative Unit. Because when I began to hear stories about, this house, they did this ritual, this person, this doctor, at this field, in this church, we heard so much information, I decided in the early 80s, we're not going to tell the victims, but we're going to write down this information, and we're going to go hunt it. We're going to go look. So we started from the early 80s on
to this very day, driving to other states, going to places, going to houses, running what we were learning surveillance from, different individuals and law enforcement teaching us. We decided we want to verify whether this is historically true, whether the people really exist, whether covens really exist, whether there's ritual sites. And all I can tell you is after all these years, over 30 years of doing that side of it, we've dug up bones. We brought them back. We've been to ritual sites. We've engaged people. We've engaged people with weapons and, running us off of their, wooded areas. It is so real and so, and the more we did that, because the real undergrounders don't expect anybody to really know or come after them. And that's kind of what we began to do. But we found out that going to places, locations, buildings, just any kind of, all these places, this would help verify for the people that were victims, because they had like a part of a memory. Well, I remember a cemetery in such and such place, and I remember this occurred. Then within the same year, we had 2 other victims tell us about it, or tell us about one of the handlers that we caught face to face, that we engaged. We found like the cemetery where this stuff occurred. So it really helped them with some of their issues of, hey, I remember this, but I don't know how to prove it. And that's been one of the big issues. It's one thing to do with traditional Satanism, a ritual site, a pentagram drawn, candles, animal carcasses, or occult crimes where a pentagram is carved into a man's chest or whatever, satanic justice symbols. Officers didn't know this. They didn't know what a black mass indicator or a satanic justice symbol was, or a power cone. So when we were, engaged with all this, including victims coming out, the big issue was the victims themselves, or sub-personalities taking us on 4 or 5 hour long trips, deep woods, other places, confiscating robes and athames and swords and knives and bloody articles and books of shadows, and it just became this whole underworld. The spiritual warfare issue side of it, we had to just immerse ourselves in that.
Let me ask you this: so now, if you would recover like a ritual knife with blood on it, and you brought it back to the police station, was their attitude, "Oh, hey, great, let's investigate this and see what we could find out. Let's try and put a stop to this," or it was like, "Oh, we can't, nothing. We don't have anything. We got nothing to work on."
Yeah, in the cases where we found something like that, like one time we were taken to out of state. This is and actually this individual was from Fort Bragg, one of the Psi warriors from the old days, Monarch Project, but was also had powerful demonic stuff, was probably the most highly learned occultist that I've met. Well, they took us, when they were trying to get out of this stuff, they took us to this other state area, deep into the woods. We were very vulnerable, and because at that time even we didn't carry weapons or anything like that. So they take us back in this woods. We drive deep into this area, down to this circular area. Here's the black mass indicator on the tree. Here's power cones, symbol signs. I drive into it. Ed, all I can say on a subjective level and dealing with the demonization side, it was as if we drove into where hundreds of demons were actually there on the site. This is where we were told human sacrifice, all kinds of stuff occurred. The guys went out starting to dig. We dug up bones, put it in my trunk, brought it back to Ohio, took it to the academy folks. They took it to the college, Kent State next to us, to have a bone specialist look at a skull cap, which they proved was, actually at that point proved that it was an animal cap, but had, what laser cut or precision cut triangle, called a power cone, in its skull, and that's all about containing a demon and so forth. So, yeah, we brought stuff back, and mainly they used the items in the occult crimes class to show what this is, what this symbol is, what that symbol is, what this athanate, means, what this, and they were using it to train other cadets. But in some of the cases that were live cases, yeah, we turned state's evidence in one case. We were called into a case where the Hands of Glory ritual in the middle of September happened, and this defense attorney called me in. Unbelievable about, this girl, 87 stab wounds, sexually brutalized, and after everything's done, middle of the night, hands cut off. They never did find her hands. And it was in law enforcement, like, this is just weird, bizarre. But it was 2 days before the Hands of Glory, right as a glory ritual, to where the Satanist or the undergrounder preserves them, believes, whether we believe this or not, they believe they'll charge these hands with great demonic power and have them and so they'll hold great power in their ceremonies and rituals and so forth. And to this day, they never found her hands. Someone out there in this location, or whether they sold them, still, has that. So we have cases where there's 2 dead girls, 14-year-old, 17-year-old. We turn state's evidence to 4 different agencies. Now the feds have taken over the case. They've got a billboard up. And we've tried to tell them, when you interrogate this guy, it's one thing to interrogate the upfront person, but when you have sub-personalities. Now, Dr. Del Griffiths, who wrote the book Secret Weapons, and was probably one of the top satanic investigators in the nation for 30 years, along with a number of others that they built in their network. We've acquired all their stuff after all these years, and we took some of the stuff to him to take a look at. It's hard for law enforcement to look at some stuff if they don't know the languages, the reasons, the motivations, and that's why I think in some of the academy stuff, trainers would tell the officers or cadets, don't say anything about the satanic side or the scary stuff, just deal with the crime, and that's pretty much how it's done. I mean, there may be, for example, the case of the 2 girls. There was some forensic evidences. There were some things that I went and found out and brought to them. But to this day, they haven't nailed this case. They interrogated the man that we and other law enforcement agents believe actually did this. But they interrogated the personality, the amnesic personality, the upfront person, not the sub-person inside that actually did the stuff and knows, what they did. Now, we engage that person.
Because even the guys that are doing this are victims.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. You're right.
Yeah.
I mean, because sometimes it's not even the person, it's the sub-person.
Right.
Like the idea of programmed shooters and programmed assassins. The good news about giving information on that is we can now go back to 1947. G.H. Estabrooks, hired by U.S. military, wrote, I've got 2 of the copies. You can barely get a copy of the book now, but it's just something called Hypnotism. But he has a chapter in which he describes how they learned from the German stuff, Nazi stuff, but how they learned how to create an alter personality in a soldier. And then they learned how to program or train, and he gave 4 categories. To send in a spy to where the sub-personality would give disinformation, or the sub-personality would spy, or the sub-personality would just infiltrate a group, or the sub-personality would be trained to be an assassin. Now that information is listed by them, not us. We don't have to, try to prove that the, psychologist, world-renowned psychologist, I think in the bad way, G.H. Estabrooks wrote it out and explained how they did it. And this should have been known, Ed. This should have been known by psychiatry, psychologists, worldwide, because many others were involved in that. And eventually books like Project Bluebird, The Purposeful Creation of Multiple Personality Disorder by Colin Ross, or even Dr. Del Griffiths' book, as a law enforcement agent, he puts in the Freedom of Information Act materials. There's a lot of factors behind
as long
that.
as they keep mentioning Dale Griffiths, okay, I'm very familiar with him because his work with the West Memphis 3 case.
Yeah.
And I've managed to make a lot of enemies in that camp over there with the supporters of that group, and they've become obsessed with me. And so I know they're listening to the show now today. Okay, but now what do you have on that case and Dale Griffiths' involvement in that case? What can you share with us on that?
Sure. Here's what we looked at that case, and what we've done, Ed, is we've acquired the entire research center of Dr. Del Griffiths and others, and we're going to now take a lot of the cold cases, like the Arliss Perry case in Sanford, the Ripper case in Chicago, some of the other cases that were all satanic. The satanic side got pushed away, the process church and all that kind of stuff got pushed away,
right.
and of course law enforcement tried to deal with just the crime. They never solved the Arliss Perry case. They never solved the Franklin cover-up case. They never solved the McMartin case. And the West Memphis 3 became a big issue because of course, Dale's down there trying to say, and I've seen the inside internal reports now, police reports, other reports, Damien Eccles and the other two were, put in jail, by two juries. And here's what we did a couple of live things on this. We had William Ramsey come in on this, who wrote an incredibly big book on the subject. He's been probably one of the most versed persons on this.
I think I've had him on 3 times, yeah.
Yeah, and he's put out a lot on this stuff, and he's convinced. And here's the weird thing. When I went to try to engage Damien Eccles, I went to Salem. I wanted to meet him. And I got warnings from both William Ramsey, I've never met William face to face, and also from Dale and another agent that said, that I had to be really careful. They know the inside story stuff. And they know the Process Church as far as the background and who helped try to get these guys out. They know the backgrounds to a lot of what really happened that the media never saw. And I can only tell you this, the preponderance of the evidences. I mean, out of anybody else pointed to Damien and so forth. I can only tell you that, these kind of cases, and many of them, there's no smoking guns. But there's also an inability for law enforcement to understand, again, sign symbols. They claim the 3 little boys that were killed. Well, the marks on them were turtles eating their flesh. There's so much to the whole of the story. I actually really prayed and offered to talk to Damien. Almost, he's 10 feet away from me up in Salem. This is a month and a half ago. I'm talking to another guy next to him. I say, that's Damien right there, right? And he goes, right. So I turn around to go talk. Damien went down an alleyway, and I don't know whether he didn't want to talk to us or not. Our goal was to engage him evangelistically and on the occult crime subject, because I believe the underground side of that case, the Son of Sam case, right, the Process Church case, all of this, some of this is still live, operative, and that's why, when like these shooters, like Jared from Arizona, Holmes, and now the bomber from Boston, people they just say on television, these guys were crazy, they went nuts, and so that's how it's kind of pushed off to the public, and everybody says, oh, okay, he went nuts. We understand. They just went nuts. We don't know what that means, but they just went nuts. And the truth is that, they're not coming out with saying, and I think David McGowan did this in his book, Program to Kill, more and more understanding that sub-personalities can come out and kill. I don't know whether that's the case with Damien Eccles. I've not met him face to face, to see him, to observe, but I would hope someday that he'll respond to us, and maybe will. But
wait, when you talk about how he had to flee, like you were intending to.
Yeah, and again, of course, there's a lot of people up there. We did a lot of prayer over. Yeah, and because we were there during Halloween Eve, Halloween Day in Salem, when thousands of folks are going to be starting to show up, and there's witches and there's all kinds of stuff going on. Cases that people are asking us to come and meet with people and do deliverance and whatever. So there's a lot of requests, but our goal was to do a little underground research, deal with Lori Cabot and the underground, kind of the talking to the dead ritual thing that they were going to do. They wouldn't let us in. So, this has kind of led us to all kinds of cases. So what I like to do, and I know that you understand this principle, if it's really real, this is a biblical principle too, Ezekiel chapter 8. If there's real sophisticated satanic underground human sacrifice stuff, summoning demons, doing powers, that kind of stuff, if it's really real, like Ezekiel 8, there's a supernatural covering. The good prophet Ezekiel didn't even know. God had to lead him, guide him, supernaturally lead him and help him and guide him into what was really going on there. So our principle is this. If it's really real, and what we learned over the years, there's certain indicators, then we're going to start praying like crazy, and we're going to just really trust God to help supernaturally break that barrier. Now, there's guys in law enforcement that think, oh, you're nuts, Russ. They don't understand this side of the picture, the supernatural side. I mean, a lot of officers were afraid or had voodoo curses put on them. They were afraid of some of the crime scene stuff they've seen, or full-blown manifesting demonic presence. Like in one guy, they had the leg chain and arm cuff that we were engaged with, and 5 officers didn't even know what to do with the guy as he started growling and speaking. And I just had to just go in and start doing deliverance. And when the guy went nuts, they had to move him out.
Yeah, we got our break coming up, but we're on
Sure.
with Russ Dizdar. Incredible information about occult crimes and satanic cults and deliverance messages, and how we can use spiritual warfare to defeat these enemies that are a threat to our lives and our family and our country. Welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Ed Opperman, private investigator, digital forensic investigator. I'm the author of the book, How to Succeed as a Private Investigator, which is available on my website, emailrevealer.com. We're halfway through the show. The show's going so fast. We got an excellent guest. I'm going to beg him to come back many, many times. Russ Dizdar. He has his own radio show, The Ragged Edge Radio. You can find out information about Russ on his one of his websites is russdizdar.com. The other one is shatterthedarkness.net. Before we get back to Russ, I just want to remind everybody it's a listener-sponsored station. We just did all these big improvements. Nighthawk went out and he did all these T1 lines and T3 lines for the station. It's a big expense this month. So if you got to help us support the station by visiting freedomslips.com and clicking on the donate button. Now, Russ, I tell you, this is just fascinating stuff. Now, here's a guy who was there in the trenches. People talk about, well, they don't believe in satanic ritual abuse, victims, and that this kind of activity going on. But here's a guy who's been there, digging up the bones, handling the weapons, seeing all the ritual activity, talking to the victims, praying with them. So we know that we've established that, okay? But what I want to ask you, Russ, is this. It seems to be you got the foot soldiers, like the guys at the Process Church. Mm-hmm. But if it originates from Nazi Germany, and then you got the CIA and MK Ultra and all this kind of stuff, all these different levels of this evil on this other side, how does it all fit in together? Are these low-level guys, or do they realize that they're working for these Nazis on the other side? And how does that all fit?
Sure. I mean, and that's the tough part of it. I mean, we've spent so many years. For me, the victims, because we've dealt with, hundreds now and spent thousands of hours, because it's not just a 1-hour deliverance, 2-hour deliverance. Many of the victims of the mind control aspects and how they were being created. It's not just a crazy thing. It's not a mental thing. So the development of MK Ultra, the Monarch Project, Phoenix, all these things from the U.S. government, our tracking includes this. The fact that Holly Hector and others, Dr. Holly Hector, Dr. Colin Ross, these are individuals, and on a secular side, Ed, they're saying maybe 10 million victims in the United States since the 50s. Now, I cannot verify the numbers, but here's the issue. It involves far more sophisticated satanic side, the ancient languages, the really underground stuff, very sophisticated Satanism. It's a network. There are the foot soldiers. Like Process Church may have part of this, and they may have been drawn in or have part of this included. The Anton LaVey popular Church of Satan stuff may not have a lot of this into it. But they're not the biggest groups. The biggest group is what's behind satanic ritual abuse. Here's why. The numbers themselves. If there are in the United States, if Colin Ross is right, he's a secular psychiatrist. I'm not even agreeing with all of his version of this, but that's all he does. He works with SRA, MPD. He believes it's real. He wrote a book. He really points his fingers at the CIA. He wrote, he names the names of dozens of psychiatrists, front groups that use the technology, the connections of Satanism, the real kind of Satanism. So, but he's the one that put out in 2002, I think, the possibility of 10 million. Now here's the issue. Here's what I begin to ask. As we had more and more victims come to our offices and taking hours and hours and being taken everywhere and out of state and all this kind of stuff. Even flew to Germany last 2 months ago to Wedelsburg Castle in our research. of the Himmler-Hitler side of this. And so we've been very dogged about wanting the facts and wanting more, because I believe that there's more to get, more to expose, but there's so many victims. And here's what we find out about the victims. They are in every single psych ward in the United States since the 80s. They are now in probably every child psychiatric unit in the United States. They are in prisons across across the United States. So as we've tracked, why are these victims in every single city, in every single psych ward, in every single township in the United States alone? Then when we went outside the United States, they're all over, the victimization is all over Canada. Australia has a massive problem. England, Ireland, Scotland, New Zealand, Germany, France. We're now getting the reports out of Russia, and that's our next venture into Russia. And then dealing with the first generation like we did in the 80s, we're dealing with the ones that are now between 55 and 65. That's first generation. Then if there's nobody that intervenes on those satanic ritually abused MPDs, they will have children automatic. It's automatic. Their children will be the same thing, split, demonized, programmed in the coven stuff. It's generational. And if nobody intervenes on that second generation, which is 35 to 45 basically, they'll be from 17 to 27, that third generation. We're dealing with many of them right now. And we've already dealt with fourth generation, 8-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 12-year-olds. So this issue is, we have to ask questions. Why are there so many of the victims? And because it's not a self-created thing, it's not somebody. I read an article on the web about how to join the Anton LaVey Satanic Church. Anybody can do that for $25-50. This is transgenerational. This is multicultural, multinational. This is an underground, and we tracked it all the way back to Lebensborn, the secret birthing centers in Nazi Germany. Whether anybody wants to believe this, they need to study it, though. The actual concept of Hitler was they were going to backbreed Aryans to become these godmen. We all know the story. We've heard about the master race. But when you look into the details, they were spiritually guided. They believed that they would create altered humans, and they're the ones with Mengele and so forth that began to develop this process of trauma-based splitting, creating alter personalities. And they believed it was a superior thing, that it was something they could do to create priestesses, assassins, controllable super soldiers, demonize. Then they would demonize them with power to make them just, stronger, faster, and all this. They were looking for an enhanced, the Nazis said super race, a master race. So all of this so-called modern-day Satanism bleeds right back to 1939, and every one of the German scientists that came over, wherever they went, whether to Canada, to the Australia, to England, wherever they went, this is where the development, even down South America, the colony of Dignidad, or South Africa, Pretoria, you're finding the same thing happening. Wherever they went worldwide to the war, in all these rat lines in the German, a lot of the SS troops got out. The creation of these individuals began to occur on a global scale. And now we just have to deal with the facts. We have millions that have shown up at psych wards, counseling centers, and even prisons that are multiple, have subpersonalities. How you find it out, how you deal with it, how you break the demonization side, which always opens up more on the inside. Because there's a supernatural, then there's a mind control, a really sophisticated mind control ability in putting down personalities, right, and really, burying this stuff.
Now, Russ, are you familiar with I believe it was in France, like in 14th century France, they found some underground catacombs with paintings on the walls that gave you step-by-step instructions on how to create a trauma-based mind control slave?
On the French side of it, I would like to see that. We've heard about. We went to France. Okay. We were in Paris. We were in Bugarashi not even a year ago, just about a year ago, this month, and so we did as much as we could there, 8 days. Here's what we know about France too. It's massively cult shops every corner in Paris. Here's where European Satanism has its, back to the 1400s. This is where the, defrocked monks with hoods and robes and what we call now the Black Mass. I got a French version of the Black Mass. given to me by a law enforcement agent. And here's where the black mass originated. This is where, the robes, the using the host, and, the virgin on the altar, doing Latin backwards. This is where all of that originates. So it doesn't surprise me, that the sophisticated trauma-based splitting would be there too. But I have not seen, the literature on that.
Yeah, I might have my information wrong, but there is, historically, I've heard about it, that there's paintings on a catacomb wall that teaches trauma-based mind control.
Yeah. And Ed, I would just say this, and I know that, there's going to be people in the area of law enforcement, the feds and others, maybe even psychiatry. They're not going to believe me on this subject, but I only press them to open their heads, their minds to understand this a little bit. Whether they believe it or not, it's spiritually, it's a supernatural spiritual belief system that these undergrounders have. And so I believe the ability to purposely create the trauma, to split, to create the subpersonalities, to do the demonization, and so forth. Now, my personal belief is that is a demonically enhanced technology. They learned it from that dark side. I have no question when it comes to the Germans, when they were sending the anarchy everywhere into France. They went to Bucharest. They were sending their hidden teams to find every spiritual dark side, thing they could find to incorporate it, to get the darkest of powers. They were the ones spiritually guided to create this vision for a master race. So, that would be very interesting to see. So I believe that this trauma-based is not, the military side may have sanitized it a little bit, like they did remote viewing, when it comes to astral projection. They sanitized a little bit, but they brought in a black satanic horse, and they haven't, they didn't understand in the 50s that this brought in all the spiritual side, that it's all begins with the dark side's agenda. And there is biblically speaking, there is a global agenda. Now, boots on the ground, digging to the underground, there's no question. This is satanic ritual abuse is part of a global development. These are the troops on the ground. Behind them would be the elites, some call it the shadow government. If we believe the Bible correctly, Revelation 13, there is a multi-continental, multinational, hidden, real satanic order being developed, politically, economically, militarily, that in the future, whether that's 5 years, 4 years, 10 years, I don't know, it will rise as if out of nowhere. It really will come about. But I believe, and not everybody has to believe this, I believe the satanic ritual abuse, the whole system of it, is part of that, and that these are the troops. Now, this is the words of inside cult loyal subpersonalities, priestesses, assassins, soldiers that we've engaged for years. Here's their words. We are the troops of the Antichrist. We are the chosen ones. We will make Hitler's SS troops look like choir boys. Russ, you have no idea how broad this is, how wide this is, how many of us there are. Russ, we smell Christian blood. Russ, we can't wait till the great chaos. In one case, in front of 5 officers, a demonized subpart came forward, screamed at every one of them right there in the room, screamed out, and we are the legions that shall rule the earth. So, that's a lot to say. After 30 years, there's a lot of content we can give behind all of what we're saying, on a historical basis, on a theological basis, on an occult, their own writings, on the victimization and on the facts that, this development is gone global, and we have to say how, why, what are they really for, and are the shooters in Arizona and in Holmes and like now the bomber in Boston? It's come out very clearly. He understood majestic mind control. The quotes I just did Monday on our radio show are that he knew that he had a secondary personality in him. He couldn't control it. He told others about it. This guy Tamerlan that's dead, of course, they're now very, very clearly saying he had a sub-personality, and that's probably a programmed subpart that was involved in the bombing.
Well, if you look at his uncle who came out, he has a very colorful history and background. It's illegal to out someone who's a member of an intelligence agency, but if you just look at his history and his background, you find some interesting things there. which is also, again, this thread that seems to run through everything.
Right.
Oh, my goodness. So it seems like, you had this, it was kind of refined in Nazi Germany, then came here through Operation Paperclip, when we brought in the Nazi scientists after World War II, and then our government, and the powers and the rulers of the earth, started using it against American citizens. And you can see now that the power that they have, because they control the media entirely. There's all kinds of occult symbolism in cartoons and children's music and Disney Channel and all this kind of stuff. So it does seem that they are able to use this to gain some kind of power and control over us.
Sure. Well, I agree. And if we understand, again, here's what I love it is the biblical prophetic picture. 1,000 prophecies in the Scripture, 500 or more already been fulfilled, explicitly, in detail, infallibly, and the rest are there being fulfilled. It speaks of a one-world government. It speaks of a rise of but supernaturally satanic order, politically, economically, and so forth. We can go back to the Nazis and say, hey, the Germans were the Germans, but Nazism was a spiritual development. Spiritual revelation led Nazi embracers to develop the political ideology, the military vision, the kind of charge satanic sciences. The Himmler Castle was going to be the supernatural center where they would rule the world from. And I stood there, where Hitler and Himmler stood in the ritual chamber, the Hall of the Dead, where Michael Aquino went and knows mind control, knows all about this. Colonel Michael Aquino, from the founder of the Temple of Set. I stood there just a month and a half ago in that same place where he did the Dadelsberg working. So here's what I'm confident of.
Well, you might want to add that Michael Aquino was the first satanic chaplain for the U.S. Army, the military.
Absolutely.
And wrote the handbook. He wrote the handbook for all chaplains of every faith to follow the guideline in order to be a chaplain in the U.S. military.
And he declared on television that they have developed a satanic grotto on every U.S. military base worldwide. Now, with Michael Aquino knowing mind control, splitting, programming, I mean, he's an expert in the area. He's literally, cutting edge when he understands this. He's written on this stuff. He knows this stuff. The Temple of Set is very sophisticated. You know, he was charged with 50-some child abuse, sex ritual cases that were not proved at the Presidio, and he sued a lot of people, to back them off. But you know what? One of the reasons he went to Dadelsberg was to do a powerful satanic ritual working there, and the goal was, in his own letter that he sent out, was to be the power, that whatever could kind of stop the investigative side. So this is why I'm telling everybody in law enforcement, telling everybody more than ever now, whether they think I'm crazy or whatever, the supernatural side is the biggest barrier to penetrate in investigating real satanic, real underground, because they have rituals just to summon demons to cover them supernaturally. I see that the underground has a supernatural barrier and an extreme physical. On the physical side, their secrecy is law. So they do everything on the secrecy side for that. But I still believe the supernatural side is number one. I think Ezekiel 8 bears that out. So in investigations, some of the reasons why the McMartin case or some of the other ones did not, the Franklin cover-up, a lot of the cases, the Arliss Perry case at Stanford, did not get covered, and a lot of the satanic cases didn't get fully uncovered, was people to investigate. But I believe that they have powers. If a Christian believes in the power of the Spirit of God, the work of God, and answered prayer and whatever, we must understand, as the Bible teaches, so it is with these people. There's real powers they use to guard themselves, cover their covens, to summon demons. They have specific rituals they had to do, summoning demons to go against law enforcement, to go against others, to cover them. One ritual is for the power of invisibility, to be able to operate invisibly. And I think a notable case would be Madame Morris, where you have this...
right.
Everybody sees it as a satanic blood and guts thing. They take, Kilroy, the college student. They not only torture him and kill him. One of the cult members is wearing, and they're doing this because they're pushing drugs too and making money.
It was a massive marijuana smuggling operation, yeah.
Sure, but one of the reasons the guy is wearing this college kid's boiled down spine around his neck, as a charged object. In Matamoros, in which I saw the inside police pictures and notebooks about the Death Tech, a SWAT team training area in Geneva, Ohio, by law enforcement agents brought in. We looked at these. We looked at the inside casework and pictures of Jeffrey Dahmer, where he had an altar built out of human thigh bones, or a power cone built out of human skulls. This did not come into the media. Nobody knows about this publicly. The Matamoros case had a girl named Sarah Aliti. In law enforcement, like the sheriff that was interviewing her, others that tried to, deal with her, she's a full-blown multiple SRA with priestess inside, high-powered abilities for rituals and summoning. Priestess, parts of the inside can cut, do rituals, do all stuff. So Matamoros, from beginning to end, is extraordinary. Satanic powers, sophistication, rituals. I don't know, I think it was 18 bodies or more. But the way in which they tortured, killed, slaughtered, then used the bones afterwards, they even believed they did such conjuring of powers that law enforcement bullets would never even strike them. Now, they did realize, they got caught. I mean, Constanza and the rest of them, went down, and yet I don't know if they're going to be able to interrogate the girl, the priestess girl that was being used in this, from the States, by the way. And that's true about some of the other places. That's true of the drug wars coming up out of Mexico. You've got them summoning powers purposely, using blood sacrifice, to the saint of death and so forth, to bless the drug trade. And so it's really deeper than we think. We can deal with just the physical and say this is the crime, okay, but the motivation is supernatural, it's demonic, and it has grown exponentially, and it will grow. I mean, this is not going to slow down.
Okay, but in the simplest terms, like when your friend Steve ran into that party, and the power of Jesus Christ is there, is present. All these demons have to flee. That's biblical. It's established, and I know for a fact it's true. Now, why can't we use this? Why can't we Christians gather together and use this authority to make all these demons flee and overturn this oppression over the country?
Ed, that's right at the cutting edge. Here's exactly what we believe, what we do. We have a thing we have a prayer map thing, the whole training course we're doing, even officers that we're connecting with across the board. So I would say, Ed, what we need to do is bring 100 people, law enforcement, others, investigators, everybody that really understands what you just said. Let's bring them to Las Vegas and let's begin to develop teams across the nation. Tony Cale is more interested in doing this now. Other law enforcement guys that are believers want to do this. I agree. And we've already started recruiting 400 or 500 prayer intercessors. We want to go into the thousands this next year. And we have a very detailed prayer map. And we have also, we didn't put this public, I'll give it to you, but we have a detailed, it's kind of a prayer map by case. In other words, if you get involved with a satanic case, if it's an SRA case, it is, you can make it 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pages long, and it involves, how then to pray for the breaking open of this, how to map out the whole structure. Because if you find there in Vegas, if you find one SRA, a real SRA and PD, here's what, and they're from Las Vegas. This means that it began in childhood. This means, if they're 40 years old, they're second generation. And if they have kids, if nobody's intervened, it means their kids are most likely multiple and SRA and have demonic stuff, that they've been to hundreds of rituals. This means that if you find one, you're going to find another 500 in the area. This means that there's a sophisticated, high, spiritually tech, and in the mind control sense, high tech group, coven, that would be in the area that they know how to do this. You cannot have an SRAPD without the group behind that knows how to create them. So I agree with you. That's the cutting edge right there, Ed, is developing the teams. And I did a 13, 14-hour training. It's on the website free called Dark Rituals, Dark Powers. It even has a couple things there, suggesting to investigators. I believe you can detect, find the victims, find the coven, just like Ezekiel 8, but it's going to take what we've talked about, the supernatural power of God, targeted prayer intercession, things like that.
we're not going to use, just like the little girl wanted to use satanic prayers to defeat her mother. It's not going to work. We can't fight the battle on their ground. We have to fight it on our ground. We're coming to a break. We got Russ Dizdar. Fascinating expert on occult crime, spiritual warfare. I really endorse this guy 100%. You can find him on shatterthedarkness.net. I'm going to be back in about 3 minutes. Okay, well, we're back on the Opperman Report. We're down to our last half hour. We got an incredible guest. I love this guy. He's just so encouraging to me right now, especially all the stuff I'm going through. I really appreciate this, Russ. Thank you very much for coming on the show. I'm going to beg you to come on in the future. We got a half hour.
Sure.
And, dude, if I would have asked you every question I have for you, I'd be doing all the talking. I'd be interrupting you constantly. But I can't help it, man. Okay, so Russ Dizdar, the Ragged Edge Radio, RussDizdar.com, ShatterTheDarkness.net. This man is doing serious work. He needs your prayer, okay? We need to keep him in our prayer. And that's one of the things I want to ask you, Russ, because, I'm a regular church-going guy, and I'm in a full gospel church, okay? But when I go up for prayer, and I tell them, listen, and I do this radio show, and I'm bringing on this guy who's in the trenches fighting against these satanic cults, and we need prayer this week. He needs prayer. I need prayer. They're afraid, and they're asleep. And the average church doesn't want to talk about this kind of stuff at all. What do you think?
Well, yeah, and it's sad, but I still hold out hope because, along with doing what we've done, and I was a local pastor for 30 years, and for those 30 years we had this Shadow the Darkness group on the side. Most of the churches I pastored, 4 of them here locally, allowed me to have an office for Shatter. Then we had separate offices eventually, and when I left the local pastorate to do this full time, because I just simply couldn't do both. Now the church that I was at, we pastored, anything that I would teach that I do now, I taught there locally. I mean, it wasn't like Satanism every Sunday morning, but we had nonstop training courses. We were highly trained in spiritual warfare principles and really making the church aware. So here's what I would say. When local churches fear the information, it's an already indicator that they're about 30 years behind the curve. Because to me, going after the information outrageously drives me to every spiritual warfare principle. It's only made me stronger, more defiant, more, I believe that growing in Christ, growing in the power of God, Acts 9:22, Saul of Tarshish, he gets saved, gets filled with the Spirit, he begins to witness. As he stays obedient, here's what it says, he grew more and more powerful. I believe the church can become incredibly powerful, but they're lacking. I've done, in the last almost 5 years now, out doing this full time, about 40 plus conferences all over the United States. Thousands of Christians coming to conferences. They want to hear about this. So when I do the conferences, one, I bring out the blood and guts. And I have, we PowerPoint presentation, we show things. It shocks them on the one hand. On the second hand, here's what occurs. Psychiatric nurses, psychiatrists, law enforcement, people working in prisons, they come. Russ, we know exactly what you're talking about. We have these individuals. We don't know what to do with them. We have individuals come forward. We do hours of counseling and prayer deliverance with people at the conferences. But here's the number one thing. I will ask almost at every conference when I'm doing these, because we'll do the big, audience, thousands. Then we'll do the smaller, 200 or 300 or 100 in a local, like a classroom setting in the conferences, the way they're set up. So I will ask believers from all over the nation that have come to these conferences, and I've done this for 5 years, how many here know what your authority in Christ is? In most cases, 90% did not know. How many here know the armor of God? And maybe 40% will put their arms up and say they know about the armor of God. Then I ask, how many here know that you have it on right now and that you're exhibiting the mighty power of God? Ephesians 6:10. And then we're down to like 20%. When it comes to spiritual warfare, even though more books have been written on spiritual warfare in the last 25 years than in the history of the church, I'm still saying, as someone who loves the body, I'm in a local church. I come out of being a local pastor. The church is, let me say it this way, derelict in its duty on discipleship in this area of spiritual warfare. Biblical spiritual warfare taught well and complete will only make the congregation stronger, more empowered, more fearless, dealing with what's really out there, letting the congregation hear. Now, years ago, I agree with you. Back in the 90s, I'm in a very, very large church. I put up a video on Satanism on a big screen in this big sanctuary that I got to use. And we began to do training seminars even there. They didn't want it, but we did them. And there would be people that would come afterwards. How could you show that stuff? Why would, this is on a Friday night or a Saturday training thing. And I was very clear, we need to understand who the enemy is and what's happening. You've got to understand that in your city, a real covenant's up there, let alone human trafficking with tens of thousands of boys and girls, in cages, in rooms, and places. We've got to understand the underground side of things. And the church, is called to go to every creature, every human being, that if anybody's going to have the cutting edge understanding of the end of days, biblical prophecy gives that. If anybody understands going to the highways and byways, Jesus does. If anybody understands how to expose the dark side, there's no question Jesus didn't hold it back. He didn't take the demonized people and hide them to where nobody sees. He dealt with it publicly. And so I just think that when you're going to request this and ask for prayer, in all the training courses, when I've taught systematic theology alongside of teaching spiritual warfare courses, heavy duty ones, in local churches and places for this area for years. Now we're putting up online, all of it free. And here, when we have people come to the classes, Ed, it is true. Once you start really getting into the depths of the biblical, discipleship and equipping that we should have, you may have some experience of warfare or realize that you've been going through warfare. You didn't know what it was. But the good news is, if you learn about the armor of God, the authority of Christ that you have to clear the air, this is the truth. Believers can become extraordinarily more powerful. I mean, really rock solid in their development and know the power of God, know what it is to deal with the enemy, not be afraid of the devil. How can the church, if anybody in the world, be afraid of the dark side? That only tells me, again, the lack of the application of the Word of God, of the equipment that God gives us, and the exercising of that equipment that really brings about God's power and shows in all these demonic cases and all these things. The authority of Christ, demons still fear Him. Demons still scream and shudder when they go out. And it's astounding.
Yeah, the gifts of the Spirit, the fruit of the Spirit, the power of God works. It works, and we can use it. We just have to.
Yeah, just like the book of Acts, and we see there that in every encounter, they even had to deal with Bar Jesus, a Jewish sorcerer. This is right in the book of Acts. And if you remember the story, how when Paul engages him and speaks about how his wickedness is, a mist comes over. He's blinded by God. This is a power encounter in which God steps in, blinds the proconsul publicly. They had to lead him out. Everybody else saw the hand of God, and he preached Christ. In the context of power encounters, Paul would preach Jesus. People would get saved. That's what we can do. We don't need to back away, hide, try to preserve the church into the 1950s, or like we're protecting the church from the harmful information. No, we need to tell the church, hell is rising. Here's what's happening. Look at the victims. Look at your city. Take prayer teams in cars, in groups all over the city. I mean, that's the approach we're going to be, that's the approach we've taken. And yes, we've seen, reprisal. We've seen backlash. We've seen warfare issues. But out of all of that in 30 years, out of all of the blood and gut stuff, the really bad stuff, attempted murder twice by them on us, and all the engagements with law enforcement, I still say this. Psalm 91, God has shown us His protection. God has shown us His power. We are here, and ready to go for the next year. And that's what I believe in being obedient to the Word, stepping out, trusting God, praying like you're talking about, only makes the whole of the body of Christ cutting edge. And God didn't give us a spirit of timidity or fear, but of power And I think that's what that guy had when he came in that party. We were having a rock and roll, drug infested, probably, satanically oriented music. It wasn't like a ritual, but all of this is going on with 40 people, and one guy shows up. Reminds me of Acts chapter 8 with Philip. One guy, Steve, walks into that apartment and unleashes
with authority.
With authority,
right.
and there was I looked and I saw a love from him, a reality, a power, a spiritual light. Now I understood dark powers on the fringe. I understood those powers and spiritualities as and without question deceptive. I knew that, but when I saw him walking in and then eventually engaging me, there was a power I never knew before. And what he had to say, because those living words of God are alive, well, that's the power of God. That's what brings the ability for the Spirit to. I was convicted. I was convinced. Right. I was undone.
Because when you see the real thing, when the real thing is right there in your presence, all of that counterfeit, all that New Age counterfeit, is pale in comparison. Now, Russ, we got like 14 minutes. I mean, we have like nothing, no time left at all. 13 minutes we have left. Okay. So I want you to tell us about these classes that you give online. These occult classes and stuff, but then also, too, my friend, I want you to finish up, okay? And tell my listeners who are seeking the supernatural, who want to experience the power of God, but they're kind of on the wrong path. They're searching this way and they're searching that way. I want you to, in the last few minutes, just give that final altar call. Okay, my friend, go to
Thank you.
God bless you, man.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it so much to be here, Ed, and I know there's going to be a connection down the road now. I just can see this happening.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, so this can be great. If anybody goes to shatterthedarkness.net, right on that right-hand column, it'll say free courses. If you click on that, there's now probably 600 hours of teaching lectures that we've done locally in a classroom setting, in a seminar setting, in a conference setting. It's all up on the web free. Hours and hours, separate training courses exposing Satanism 101. There's one called Dark Rituals, Dark Powers. There's one called Confronting the Powers Through the Great Commission. There's one on the Book of Daniel. There's one on the Black Awakening, the book that we wrote. There's a 24-hour lecture series on the book on how they do this. And, what we've said here in the last, hour and a half or so, there's 24 hours of training that I still think just scratches the surface. But that's all free. It's all there. And now we're going to develop even more training. So in January, on Tuesday night, Tuesday night, the Satanic Occult Crimes, what we're talking about here, the second part. We've already done a first part. It's absolutely free. There is a workbook. They want to get the workbook and use it. They can order that from a publisher, but they don't have to have that. Other than that, it's absolutely free. And then same thing in the second part. There's a new workbook coming out. It'll be another, I think this one's going to go 16. I think we're going to go all the way to May on Tuesday nights. It's 2 hours, and we'll just simply be on occult crimes, satanic crimes, and everything we would teach locally we're going to put out. On Wednesday night from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, it's Spiritual Warfare, the second part, which deals with more sophisticated areas like ritual workings, astral projection, sleep paralysis issues, all the new stuff, and how do you use your authority? How do you guard? How do you spiritually discern? So Wednesday night is Spiritual Warfare. It's called Basics and Advanced, and that's absolutely free also. All the way from January 14th to the middle of May, and that's live. They can get in the chat rooms. They can ask questions, and usually the first hour I do lecture. The second part we get into in questions and so forth. And what I would say, and totally to everyone who listens, is I was back in the late 60s, early 70s, what people would call today, I was a New Ager. I was a seeker. I could say I was somewhat Buddhist, but I was also somewhat occultist. Anything supernatural that moved. Now here's the fact. It was all real, but it was really lethal. And that's what I tell everybody in the last, 35 years of ministry everywhere, whether Satanist, New Ager, someone into Santeria, whether occultism, all kind. There is so much today to be involved with worldwide. The broadest supernatural counterfeit is upon us, and it's going to get deeper, wider, broader. It's predicted in 2 Thessalonians 2. That in the coming development and rise of the Antichrist and so forth comes this rise of satanic or counterfeit or disguised supernaturalism, signs, wonders, miracles, all this, to deceive people. So the broadest supernatural deception in human history is already here, I believe. And this is only the scratch of what's to come. And we now probably see a globally billion, or more involved, whether you go to the New Age or you go down deep to this really sophisticated underground. The powers are real. There's one Greek word I want to bring today from the biblical background of, many of you know the verse out of 2 Corinthians that Satan is able to masquerade as an angel of light. The word masquerade is metaskizmazo. It means that these entities, Satan himself, the demonic realm, they have the physics, the power to completely morph their appearance without changing their nature. So you have ascended masters and spirit guides, and you have all of this array that is the dark side masqueraded. Now the underground, and they know they're summoning power demons and they want this. They know that their covens, they're unleashing and summoning and sending powers. They know they're the fuel. They're kind of like the thousands and thousands of covens are like in contrast to the church prayer meetings. As we would pray for the advance of the cause of Christ, they are summoning and sending for the advance of the satanic agenda. All of this is real on that side of the fence, but lethal. So here's what I usually say to everybody. If whatever spiritual stuff you're into, whatever supernatural stuff you're into, doesn't lead you to crystal clear a relationship with God or to the person of Jesus Christ. And the reason I'm going to say Jesus Christ very clearly is I'm not ashamed of him because he is, in my estimation, the hero of humanity. He is, as the prophecy said 700 years in advance, or the resurrection prophecies of Christ 1,000 years in advance, this would be God in human flesh who would come for us to bring us back. He would conquer the death issue, the sin issue, the barrier. He would conquer the dark side, expose it. We can come to know God personally. We can have the very presence of God come into us through what Jesus did. What he did at the cross, I call it the physics of God, or the work of God, where indestructible immortality, the gift of eternal life, knowing God personally, being totally forgiven, having the Spirit of God come in to lead, guide, and direct, not spirit guides, finite demons masquerading, dark side spirits masquerading. So as millions and millions more are being sucked into that dark side, here's what's very evident. They're not led to God, they're led further away into spiritual practices. It's real, but it blinds and darkens them and takes them deeper into the underground. That dark side is promising an evolution to godhood. It never has occurred. This is what was promised by Satan in Genesis 3. This is whether the New Age, whether in the ufology realm, whether the underground, the promise, the satanic masqueraded doctrine is, hey, humanity's going to we can have an evolution to godhood. Homo lumos, or homo deity. The other side of that is there's a satanic agenda, a new world order. The world is getting the spin saying that we need a whole new world order, which is true. But what Christ will bring when he returns, the peace, the end of war, the end of all this lying and so forth. But it all begins with knowing Jesus. He is God in human flesh. Look at him. That's all I challenge anybody who's a seeker, who's looking. Don't take a kind of counterfeit spiritual, dumbed down Jesus, a de-deified, fake psychic Jesus. That doesn't work. You got to look at the real one who died on the cross that said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. The Bible's promises are massive. Whosoever calls on the name of this real living Christ who died and rose, the Spirit of God will come into you. The living Christ will come into you. He forgives. He empowers you. The gift of, I like to call it indestructible immortality. You'll see God face to face someday, and you'll be aware what's really happening when you know the living Christ, the Savior, Jesus. He loves you. He pursues you. You can turn to him right now today, as I did in 1975. He's never left me, never forsaken me. He's here to this day. He's who I love, and that's the reason we're here doing what we do.
Amen. And it's a free gift. For all, everyone who walks the face of the earth. It's a free gift we can all take part of. You don't have to walk into a church. You can just invite Jesus into your heart right now in your own home, where you are right this minute, and it'll change your life. and it's the real thing. And I can't thank you enough, brother. I really can't thank you enough.
I deeply appreciate it, Ed. I hope we connect and get together.
Yeah, definitely. Now, let me ask you this. Sometimes I do like a little after show where after the show is broadcast on the air, we record a little conversation. We take calls from the listeners and stuff like that. Do you have any time today or no?
I could probably, because I got a live radio thing coming up in 2 hours. I got to prep. I could probably do something for 15, maybe 20 minutes.
Okay, let's try and give it 15, 20 minutes and see if anybody calls in. Also, too, the show is going to be moving to Saturday nights. Coming up in January, we're going to be moving to 7 p.m. Saturday night, Pacific time, the Opperman Report. We're going to get Russ Dizdar back, and all his incredible work, these courses that he has on his website, shatterthedarkness.net, and also we're going to be plugging his show, the Ragged Edge. Ragged Edge. Ragged Edge Radio, yeah. What kind of guests you have coming up?
See, during the satellite one, there's no ability, we don't do guests that's just a 1 hour, it's kind of a sermon brought down into a talk show, but it's what I do to speak. It goes into Europe, it goes all over. Now on Tuesday nights and Wednesday nights, specifically Tuesday, in the live course, I have brought in Dr. Del Griffiths, I brought in William Ramsey, I've brought in Tony Kail, and I brought in Dr. Holly Hector, who's worked with SRAs for almost 25 years. So we will bring in from January on some folks like that into that. So we will have guests on the Tuesday night course, but it will be angled into what that course is about.
Now with the courses too, do you get any kind of college credits for this? Continuing education credits?
The truth is this: any of the courses we put out, I could, if the local college here would allow me to. I mean, to me, it's a college level training that they'll get. I don't know how to do that to get, accredited or whatever. If there's a way down the road we learn how to do that, or if some college would like to write to us or a Bible school say, hey, we want to see about connecting and giving our student a credit. Be glad to do that. We had to learn how to put it up, and we put it out for free. Here's what's occurred. In almost 5 years with these training courses and the archives of it, as of this date, in 120 countries, 7 million downloads have occurred. So, and I think it's because we left them free. So that's all we're able to say right now. We're offering them. They're there. We've had we have law officers and psychologists and pastors. All kinds of folks are taking them. But as far as the accreditation, I don't know if there's a school or something that wants to ask, we'd be glad to touch that area, but I don't know how to do that right yet.
Well, that would be great, because I know some states require private investigators to take continuing education credits, and that would be great if we can use this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that would be very good.
Forget it. Okay, so Russ has agreed to give us a couple of minutes for the after show. The show's almost over. We've got about a minute left, but if you want to Skype in to ed.opperman, or you want to call in to, what is the number here? 702-605-4894. We have a little after show. It's informal. You can ask questions of Russ Dizdar. You can have comments if you want to share something, an experience you've had or something like that. And then we archive it, and we put it up on YouTube on the Opperman Report YouTube channel. Thank you to our guest, Russ Dizdar. Shatter the Dark.